On July 6, 1988, late in the evening, the Piper Alpha platform in the North Sea was torn down by a series of explosions. The majority of the oil rig's topside modules plummeted into the water over the course of the following several hours while completely engulfed in flames. 167 men passed away, while countless others suffered injuries and trauma. 10% of UK oil production was impacted by the largest offshore oil spill ever, which resulted in projected financial losses of £2 billion, $2.5 billion today, or 10% of the country's total oil production. What exactly happened to Piper Alpha? What caused such terrible results, and why? About 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen, Scotland, is where you'll find the Piper oil field. One of the first deep-water reservoirs in the northern North Sea to be used for production was found in January 1973, a record that has only sometimes been surpassed. Oil production began in December 1976, less than 4 years after discovery. To the specially constructed refinery on the island of Flotta in the Orkneys, oil was exported via a subsea connection that was 128 miles long. When Piper Alpha's operator, Occidental, requested permission to raise rates, permission was granted with the condition that gas should also be exported rather than flared. Piper Alpha proved to be extremely prolific. In December 1978, a gas treatment plant underwent renovation and gas export commenced. Gas was compressed, followed by expansion to cool it off after water and hydrogen sulfide had been removed in molecular sieves. The heavier gas fractions, primarily propane, condensed as a liquid, while the lighter gas fractions, primarily methane, continued to be exported. In order to inject the condensate into the oil for export to Flotta, it was gathered in a sizable vessel and connected to 2 parallel condensate pumps, duty and standby. There were 2 different operating modes, take note. Phase 1 mode involved flaring excess gas, whereas Phase 2 mode involved exporting gas. Up until 3 days prior to the tragedy, when the molecular sieves were pulled out of operation for normal maintenance, Piper was running in Phase 2 mode. Then Piper could run in Phase 1 mode thanks to a reconfiguration of the gas and condensate treatment facilities. Condensate was still separated from the gas and put into the oil export line, but any gas left over was flared to provide fuel for the Piper's turbo generators and gas lift system. Condensate pump B tripped on July 6, 1988, around 21:45. Gas alarms went out, the first stage gas compressors tripped, and the flare was seen to be much bigger than typical shortly after that. At around 2200 hours, Piper Alpha was torn down by an explosion. Witnesses reported hearing a loud, sustained screeching sound, which was then followed by the light and wash of an explosion. They were thrown to the ground and knocked off their feet by the men in the control room. In the housing complex, the majority of the guys were off duty. They were lifted from chairs or flung from their beds. A condensate line teeing into the main oil line ruptured in Module B, the oil separation module. As a result of the first explosion in Module C, the gas compressor module, a second flash and blast were heard by witnesses as a massive fireball erupted into the night sky. A high-pressure gas pipe attached to the tartan platform, run by Texaco, ruptured 20 minutes later at around 22:20, discharging gas at an initial rate of roughly 3 tons per second. Approximately 50 minutes later, at 22:50, a gas line owned by Total ruptured, releasing gas that was travelling through Piper Alpha from the Frigg field via MCP-01 to St. Fergus. 2 of the 3-person crew and the 6 guys they had just pulled from the water perished in a quick rescue craft that had been sent from Sandhaven, a vessel on standby. An Occidental-operated platform called Claymore's gas pipe ruptured around 80 minutes later at 23:20. The tremendous fires had already severely compromised Piper Alpha's structure by this point, causing the topsides to begin to fall. At least 81 men were taking refuge in a 4-story structure known as the main housing module before it slid into the water. Inside, everyone perished. By the early hours of July 7, 1988, the original topsides and a sizable portion of the jacket had been completely destroyed and were lying in a tangled mass 140 meters below the surface of the water. The flames produced by the well and oil and gas line fires, all of which burst one by one, had a height of around 200 meters and a peak energy consumption of roughly 100 gigawatts, which is 3 times the pace of the UK's entire energy consumption. The fires were put out after more than 3 weeks. On March 28, 1989, the Piper Alpha's wreckage fell into the water. Only 61 of the 226 passengers who were on board that night survived. 109 people perished from smoke inhalation, 13 people drowned, and 11 people suffered injuries, including burns. The cause of death could not be determined in 4 cases, and 30 remains were never found. What went wrong? Condensate pump A was shut down on the evening of July 6, 1988, for repair on its motor drive connection, according to the investigation's findings. Likewise, a blind flange was certainly installed in pump A's place of the pressure relief valve that had been removed for maintenance purposes under a separate authorization. Neither a leak test or a pressure test were performed on the flange. The workers unsuccessfully attempted to restart pump B after it tripped at around 21:45. Pump A was scheduled to be out of service for repair. However, since the maintenance had not yet begun and the issue with pump A was not very serious, it would not have been unusual for the operators to consider restarting it. The operators would not have realized that the pressure relief valve for pump A was missing because to the manner that work permits were set up on Piper Alpha. Condensate leaks from a blind flange that had been placed in substitute of the pressure relief valve but had not yet been fully tightened up, it is assumed, while the operators attempted to reinstall pump A. Condensate that was on the run caught fire. A fire and an oil pipe leak occurred shortly after the initial explosion. The subsequent gas line failures led to a rapid escalation of the calamity. Long before the catastrophe, there were numerous indicators that something was wrong with the Piper Alpha's safety management systems. A contract rigger lost his life in an accident aboard Piper Alpha less than a year prior, on September 7, 1987. The incident made clear how inadequate the shift handover and permit to work processes were. There was a wonderful chance to correct these, but it was lost. Offshore safety was managed at the time of the catastrophe by means of prescriptive rules. Providing all possibilities have been taken into account, such regulations have their uses. However, a system that is dependent on legislation will fail since it will not address behaviors that are not covered by regulations. Because it is impossible to account for every scenario in a set of general principles, people feel complacent when they are led to believe that safety can be secured by laws that are upheld by inspectors. There is a very human urge to determine exactly what went wrong, to assign particular causes for every disaster, to carry out specific recommendations to remedy them, and to move on after any accident. One could argue that the Cullen Inquiry's decision to leave the precise cause of the catastrophe unresolved was a positive thing. The many further lessons Cullen provides in his very exceptional study may have been overlooked by those with strong permit-to-work systems due to complacency. The lessons in this tragedy demonstrate the pervasive system flaws that caused the Piper Alpha catastrophe. It is obvious that there were significant design problems, yet even flawlessly constructed hardware can occasionally be misused. Safety requires technical precautions, but they are not sufficient in any way. When it comes to safety, a proper management structure is also necessary, and that structure needs to be maintained from project conception through change and decommissioning. And that ends today's episode. You can suggest topics you want to see next in the comment section below. Please subscribe to Weather Collapse if you want to know more, and be updated on the latest news about natural calamities or disasters happening all over the world, and don't forget to like today's video. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.